Hello, I'm Nicole Saylor. I'm director of the American Folklife Center. I'm thrilled to be here today with Amythyst Kiah, singer-songwriter, who will be performing tonight at the Library of Congress as part of our COVID-19 American History Project Symposium. So we're going to speak a little bit today about her musical past and what the things that she's working on. And so we'll go ahead and get started. All right, welcome.
Cool. Hey, thank you. Yeah, it's good to be here.
Great to have you here. Partly why you're here is because of some of the work you did during COVID. Like a lot of artists, it was a really rich and hard time, but a creative time. And I want to get to that, but I guess I'd like to start out first about talking about your origins in music. Can you remember and share your first musical memory?
My first musical memory, that is so specific.
Or thereabouts?
I would say, I guess my earliest memories in general come from growing up listening to music in my house playing all the time. I'm sure in the womb I was also hearing music as well. But both my parents loved listening to music, and my dad is an audiophile, so he had like an integrated amplifier, cassette player, CD player, record player. He even had reel-to-reel tape.
Nice.
And so he had like three-way speakers. So he was very, very interested in like getting the best quality sound out of anything. And he used to make mixtapes and stuff. Both of my parents, but especially my dad, was like a big music influence on me. Because later on I would make mixed CDs. So like I got into like recording, but like I guess, with, the advent of like having the internet and MP3s coming around. So I ended up exploring music, but in a different, slightly different context. So, so I really got into listening to music. And when I was 13, my parents saw that I was interested and asked if I wanted to play an instrument, and I ended up picking guitar. So my parents bought me a guitar when I was 13. And the music my parents listened to was a lot of, it was like blues rock, disco, jazz. So it was like a really broad range of music. And when I would get into music, I started out with listening to a lot of pop music, but then eventually I got into a lot of alternative music, a lot of alternative 90s, early 2000s stuff. And then I ended up learning about, while playing guitar, I also had started listening to like a lot of pop punk, because I ended up playing Tony Hawk Pro Skater and got into skateboarding for a little bit. Okay. So I ended up learning about, a whole different genre of music. Yeah, those are kind of my earliest memories of just listening to music in my parents' in our house, and then developing my own sense of taste for a lot of like alternative music and stuff. And music ended up being a way for me to be able to express myself when I couldn't always maybe find the words to express. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So when you said I wanted to play guitar, did you learn in school? Did your dad teach you? Like, how did you learn to play and sing?
My parents bought me a CD-ROM and DVDs and VHS tapes, whatever I can get my hands on. So I just took video lessons, and then I figured out how to read guitar tablature. So the first 4 years I played guitar and was learning songs. Was kind of just doing it on my own with video lessons. So, and I learned how to, play by ear. And then I want to say in my third or fourth year playing guitar, eventually my parents transferred me from the public high school I went to a arts high school, because once I stopped playing basketball, because I played sports and stuff for a little bit, just who I was becoming as a person was leaning more into the art-related stuff. I feel like I was a little too emotionally sensitive for team sports. But but yeah, so I started to, it was my senior year, I took a semester of classical guitar at the arts high school that I went to. And that really opened me up to learn how to play fingerstyle and to learn that, like, you know, my hand can be like a little orchestra or a little band, and really allowed for me to add more to my guitar accompaniment for songs. So, and because I was like catching on to things a little more quickly than the other students, because I'd been playing guitar, and we had the sheet music, but I also was mostly just like playing by ear and like watching his hands and the teacher's hands. So he gave me like some pieces that were a little more advanced than what the rest of the students were doing. And so I took this stuff home, and I also, asked to record him playing it. And so then I was kind of looking at the sheet music, but mostly listening. And I remember coming back, and this is when I learned that I wasn't sure if the classical world was going to be for me personally, but when I came back, and it was like, I felt like what I did sounded good, and he's like, it sounds great, but this note is wrong, this note is wrong, this is this, and I'm like, oh. I was like, come on, do I really need to be so specific? So anyway, I kind of was like, well, I don't know if maybe going into that realm is going to be for me, but was still a very valuable class to take, and was very inspirational for me to, continue to grow my right hand technique for different rhythmic and melodic possibilities. So I'm very grateful that I had that. But and then later on, I would go on to stumble across traditional music in college.
Well, I was going to say, now you went to East Tennessee State University. You studied what, bluegrass, Appalachian music?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. How did that impact you as a musician then?
It was a major pivotal moment when I started to go down that path. When I got to East Tennessee State University in Johnson City, and I decided to have kind of a semester off from college, because I needed some space to really think, and also moving to a new town, so I just needed some more time to adjust. So I was like, well, let me see if I can find a music class or something to do. And so I decided to check out the classical guitar classes. I was like, well, let me just go check it out and see what's up. And I sat and just observed one of the classes, and I was like, no, I can't.
No?
I just, never mind. But then I found this bluegrass guitar class, like a group guitar class. I had no idea what bluegrass was. All I knew about like the Beverly Hillbillies and Deliverance. That's all I knew about bluegrass.
Yeah, okay.
I had no point of reference. But I was like, well, it'd be it's a music class. I'd get to play guitar, maybe meet some people. So I was like, well, I'll just give it a shot. And I remember calling Jack Tottle, he's the founder of what's now called the Bluegrass Old Time and Roots Music Program. Mm-hmm. He was teaching the group guitar class, and I called him and I was like, hey, am I going to have to learn how to like sight read and bring like a footstool? And I don't think anybody had ever asked him that question. And he was like, no, you don't have to do that. This is an oral tradition. So if you can play by ear, you can bring your tape recorder. If you can read guitar tablature, you're good. So I showed up, and I ended up learning like a couple of flat picking songs. And then I also learned like 3-finger style. I didn't really latch on to flat picking as much, just because I just love playing rhythm more. So I kind of added that 3-finger style, what they call Merle Travis picking, adding that to the arsenal of things to do, and learning those alternate bass lines became a big part of my kind of finger style sound. So, and then I went on I took like American folk music class with a guy named Dr. Ted Olson, who's like an amazing encyclopedia of knowledge on all things Southern music. And that opened me up to just learning about the cultural history of the music that is part of my cultural heritage growing up in Appalachia. Like this music is, and I grew up in the suburbs, so like, you know, like there's a certain kind of culture in the suburbs, and it doesn't necessarily lead one to old time music or string band music, but just getting a deeper understanding of like the history of all the music that I was listening to, like all the contemporary stuff I was listening to wouldn't have existed if it wasn't for, you know, that early, you know, fiddle and banjo music. So that really kind of opened my mind, because I think for me, it's always been really important as I move through life of like, how do I fit into the big picture? Like, what is my purpose? You know, that's always kind of been, and anything I decide to do, I want to understand at its core, what is this thing that I'm about to do? And is it something that aligns with me as a person? So that allowed for me to really help develop my sense of identity. And as opposed to feeling sort of like, you know, kind of like a misfit on an island, I realized, no, there's historical context for my existence and the things that I enjoy. Like all of this is connected, you know? So anyway.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, so.
Absolutely. You were talking about the suburbs. You once called yourself an anime nerd mall goth,
yeah.
I believe.
Yeah, that was my big thing in high school. And what really opened me up is when I went to the arts high school, everybody's a bunch of weirdo nerd kids. So it was just like, I was like, oh, so there's at least one place on this planet where I can actually be myself. But yeah, and that's where I got introduced to there's actually this group of black nerds, which I had never actually even met a black nerd until I got to the school, and they taught me. I was really into vampires at the time, and I'm getting a little off topic, but I was really into vampires at the time, and all I knew about anime was I knew about like Pokemon, and that kind of came a little after my time. So I was like, well, that's not dark and scary enough for me. But then someone recommended me a vampire anime, Vampire Hunter D, and I was like, oh, so there's like more to this anime thing. So, and then now I'm like getting back into it, and now like all the kids are now it's cool. I'm like, so now everybody's jumped in, and now it's cool, and I'm like, well, that's fine.
After hanging it long enough, you know.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah,
so.
that's cool. That's great.
Yeah.
So, you released your first album, Dig, in 2012. How did you come to do that?
Well, that first album, I actually recorded that. There's this really, really great recording lab at East Tennessee State University. And Ben Bateson was still is the recording lab manager there. And they started offering recording classes for musicians. And so I took 2 or 3 recording classes under him, and also did my capstone project in the recording lab. So I spent a lot of time there, and they offer a very nice discount for students. So, so I was like, all right, well, I've got X amount of money, and let's do it. So it was really just me, acoustic guitar, banjo, and then there was like some foot stomps and tambourine action on a few songs. But yeah, we ended up recording it in like 4 or 5 days, and yeah, that was cool. I think the first thing I'd ever actually recorded, it was like an EP, and Martin Walters, he actually lives not too far from where I live. And I had learned about him doing recording. The thing was though with that, because he was I guess I didn't get a student discount from him, so it was like I had this finite amount of money, and I had to I was rushing through songs, and he and it for my performance and how it was, like, it still turned out really great because he's an awesome producer and recording engineer. But that project with Dig allowed for me to be like, okay, I've got 4 or 5 days, like, and just, it really, that was my first taste of, wow, when I actually have the time, I can actually, so anyway, you just,
Okay.
just learning about, time and money and recording and all of that. But yeah, Dig was my first, moment where I really understood and was able to, like, sink into, the recording process without rushing through. So that was a good thing.
Cool.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I wanted to ask you about a couple songs you did with Amythyst Kiah and her Chest of Glass that featured Vera Hall, which, of course, we have those recordings from 1939 and 1948 in our archives. So can you talk about what got you interested in those songs? And
yeah, so at the time I was still at East Tennessee State University, and I was playing in the Old Time Pride Band. And around that same time, I'd also started playing with a group of guys that lived in Johnson City, and they were in another local band called This Mountain. And I had done like a couple of shows with them, and then we got interested in wanting to, play some shows together, and then eventually got to the point where we, like, decided to make an EP. And the way that I learned about the Vera Hall song was, honestly, I was like looking up stuff on YouTube, and a video with like a picture of her, like, popped up, and I clicked on it, and I immediately recognized that this, I was like, oh, hey, this is from that song that Moby did. And then I was like, but this is like the actual recording. And the fact that it was completely a cappella, I was like, wow. I mean, it was just amazing to just hear her voice solo like that. So then I went down the rabbit hole and looked on the Library of Congress website and, like, listened to all the rest of the songs. And then I decided to, record or at least learn the song and kind of reimagine it, with guitar. And then I ended up writing a verse that ended up becoming, like, the second verse of the song. So, just to make it a little bit longer. But that was, and then, we recorded that EP, and that song made it on there, which, that was a cool time, because I was getting back into, like, my sort of alternative rock kind of roots. And I remember it being it was so interesting because, I loved playing with the guys, and, like, they were great. I think the biggest adjustment was being around, like, amps and drums, where I'd been playing with string bands for, like, a really long time, and it was such a crazy adjustment of, like, how sensitive I was to the other many sounds happening. So that was, like, kind of an interesting time to, I guess, bring that aspect of my musicality, like, back into my world, and it was cool. Yeah.
Very good. I want to talk a little bit more about your string band work and your work with Archival collections. So Archival documentation, including narratives of enslaved people, was an inspiration for Our Native Daughters.
Yes.
And so, and this, for those of you who may not know, was a black banjo supergroup. It included Rhiannon Giddens, Allison Russell, and Layla McCalla, and Amythyst. Can you please talk a little bit about that project for those who may not know, and talk about what that meant for you?
Yeah. Yes. So Rhiannon reached out to me. I think it was towards the end of 2017, and at that point, I'd already been out on tour with her on a couple of her tour legs for Freedom Highway. And I initially met her because she asked me to open up for her, which was really cool.
Oh, nice.
Because I was, a big Chocolate Drops fan. They were really influential in me, deciding to pursue, traditional music in college. So really awesome opportunity, and got a chance to, I got, fortunately, this is not a typical thing, but because it was just me, I was able to have a little spot on the bus, which was nice. And that is not something that happens all the time. So I got a chance to really see, like, what is it like to be a professional musician, and like what that all looks like. So it was just a really, really, really cool experience. But anyway, so sidetracked. Back to the phone call. So she called me and asked about being part of this project. And she had also reached out to Allison and Layla as well. And she was like, hey, I'm doing this project with Smithsonian Folkways, with the African American Legacy Series. And would y'all be available? And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. So
it was very great.
Yeah. So then it all happened pretty swiftly, because then maybe like about a month or two later, we were all in Louisiana. We were there for like 3 weeks, and we like wrote and recorded at the same time. And it was actually my first time doing co-writing, which we kind of had to, just because of the time that we had. And in the past, I never co-wrote, because a lot of the songs I was writing, I mean, they were very personal, and I didn't want anybody else looking at it,
Sure.
unfinished. So, but in this instance, it was, while obviously, like, the story that we were engaging with obviously had a connection to us and our lives, in various degrees. It was something that was not directly about me, and that made it easier to just jump right into, okay, well, this is what I have. My brain has stopped working. Can you help? That kind of thing. So,
nice.
That was cool. I ended up co-writing Moon Meets Sun with Rhiannon and Allison. That was actually the first song that was written for the record. And then I co-wrote 2 songs with Allison, Blood and Bones and Pollyanna's Hammer. And then I wrote Black Myself, which was actually one of the last songs that was written and recorded. And really, that experience, I was actually kind of going through a bit of like a writer's block, in a sense. And I also was at a crossroads as to figuring out, like, what I wanted my next full-length album to be. Do I want it to be playing old-time music, or do I want it to be my original songs? Because I was writing original songs that I was playing with the band when I would do the rock band shows. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I kind of want to find a way to make all of this cohesive. But anyway, so I was at this weird crossroads where I just wasn't really thinking about writing anything new, and being there and writing about something completely different was kind of my first taste of like, writing about something other than about myself, which can be really exhausting. Like, it's like constantly self-referencing yourself.
Widen the lens.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's a level of like self-absorption that can get a little too dangerous. So, it's like getting pulled out of yourself and into something else. That was like a huge, it ended up being a beautiful exercise in like just doing something totally different, which is not it's not why I did it. I did it because of the, the message of, what was happening. So, and also being able to be in a situation where we were able to talk about experiences that really only happen to, Black people in mostly white spaces. Mm-hmm. Then there's also idea of like, being a woman in all, being a Black woman in all white spaces. There's all these different, intersectional things, of course. So being able to like relate and talk about some of those things without feeling like you have to explain was also another really powerful moment of like, okay, somebody else gets it, Yeah. Because, I think when it comes to identifying with other people or understanding other people's experiences, like there are some things that are just like you can empathize or whatever, but you can't necessarily like just fully like get it, So not to say that there's anything wrong with that, but it's nice when that can happen. And that happens in so many different ways, but for different people depending on the thing. But
that's so amazing.
Yeah. What else did I answer that question? No,
you did. You got it. You got it. But I want to ask too about Black Myself, which is, took you to the Grammys. I mean, that was a huge hit. Can you talk about how that came to be? You said you wrote that, but in the context of collaborating.
Yes. Yeah. The thing is like even though I wrote the song by myself, it absolutely was influenced by that entire experience. Because like I said, it happened toward the end. It was actually kind of spontaneous. I think at one point I remember we were talking about like, having some sort of a song about like triumph, because there's a lot of very sad song. I mean, sad is not
doesn't touch
is an understatement, but just a lot of like kind of dealing with a lot of dark stuff, and it would be great to maybe have a song that's more anthemic and can like bring a sense of hope and resilience. And so with Black Myself, I started thinking about, I'd been listening to Sid Hemphill's version of John Henry, which was the version that inspired, writing new lyrics for Calling Anne's Hammer with Allison. But there was a phrase in that song, in his version, that had kind of been stuck in my head, and it was, I don't want no bright Black woman, Black myself, Black myself. And so the Black myself part kind of turned into a hook. And then it also that particular line made me think about like, him talking about not wanting to have a woman that's too dark. It made me think of like, that was an example of like intraracial discrimination that would happen within Black communities. In some communities, there were these societies called brown societies, and if you were darker than a paper bag, you weren't allowed in, because the coping mechanism for segregation was, well, if we can be as light as possible, have our kids be as light as possible, be as Eurocentric in appearance as we can, then like we can get the privileges or some of the privileges that white people get. So that ended up being, that ended up turning into the line, I don't pass the test of the paper bag because I'm Black myself. So then I started to figure out like the format of like, okay, so I'm gonna pick a thing, like pick an issue that has happened, in the context of, segregation and racism, and then because I'm Black myself. So those first two verses, the first verse is from the point of view of an enslaved person. And then, there's the line about your precious God ain't gonna bless me because I'm Black myself. Because there was the slave Bible that slaves were given that edited out anything other than be obedient to your master. So that was, the context of that first verse. The second verse is from the perspective of someone living during Jim Crow who's dealing with the gatekeeping that happens. Like, I pick the banjo up and they stare at me because I'm Black myself. There were, fiddle and Black fiddle banjo players would be turned away at recording sessions because, the record executive decided that hillbilly records are only white people playing string band music. So if a Black person wanted to play string music, they were like, oh, well, that's not going to sell. So you need to come back and like play the blues, play the blues guitar. So that was an answer to that. And then the final verse is, from my perspective, just recognizing all of the shoulders that I'm standing on of, the civil rights activists and abolitionists and all of the allies and all of that. And just recognizing like I'm able to do what I do today and be who I am today because of the people that, sacrificed before. So out of a full circle of like, there's tragedy, but then there also is triumph, and, we endure the tragedy to try to strive for the triumph or something like that. So, yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Before we pivot to talking about COVID, is there any other experience that you had during that time with Our Native Daughters that you would want to bring forward right now?
Yeah. Honestly, just like some of my favorite, honestly, my favorite parts of it were once we got in, I think the most nerve-wracking part was probably just like the writing of the songs. Because again, it had to happen so quickly. But nailing the song and then getting in the studio. And we had a wonderful band. It was actually the band that Rhiannon was traveling with full time at that time. And it was just such a great group of people. Just getting there and just playing that music and playing the songs like so fresh, and then recording them in the studio with everybody, and everybody like, being just absolute professionals, being able to pick up so quickly on what we were doing. Like it was such a beautiful experience to be able to record with all those folks. I really enjoyed that. And also like, the post, like we had like a few nights where we went to this, Dirk Powell, who was the co-producer on the record. There was a few nights where we went out to this like really great Cajun spot in Lafayette. It was about, I guess, maybe 10 or 15 minutes away from where we were staying. So we had like some really great nights of good food and hanging out, and it was cool. Like having those experiences that really, the connecting during and after the studio was really wonderful.
I bet.
So,
I bet it was. Yeah. If I can stick with chronology, and there's time, I would ask about Wary and Strange.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That Rolling Stone called it one of the top 25 country and Americana albums of 2021. I listened to it a lot.
Oh yeah. Thank you.
I like it a lot. Deeply personal, that one, not so much traditional music.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know if there's anything you want to share about the experience of that one.
Well,
that's such a big question for such a short period of time.
No. Well, it was interesting because, the songs that were on that record were, 2 or 3, sometimes 4 years old. And it was just because there was, 3 different, iterations of these songs. There ended up being 2 different recording sessions. And this was what I was referring to earlier about figuring out like what I wanted my sound to be, and then realizing I wanted to like combine all of these things. But, I had 2 sets of recordings from 2 different studios that sounded very different. And so those songs that were going to be songs for the album ended up becoming demo recordings, because once we like shopped labels and ended up, going with Rounder, the A&R guy, Mark Williams, he hooked me up with Tony Berg, who ended up producing the record. And I remember sitting in the studio, it was Sound City in Los Angeles, and he was like, we're gonna probably have to re-record everything in order for it to be cohesive. And I was like, that's what I was afraid of. And I was like, oh my God, I've already been in the studio like so many times. It's like, oh my God, I gotta do this again. But it ended up working out, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do it. We'll go with it. And I mean, it ended up being an incredible experience. And to be in like such a legendary studio and work with, you know, from working with Tony to working with the sound engineer there, with working with the studio musicians that came in and out. And it was just like my first time being in a, like, I guess, you know, to me, it was kind of like the big time from the standpoint of like working with these like established, seasoned players and people. And I learned a lot about, you know, what being a producer is, you know, and it was, so that was a really like incredible experience overall. But once it came time to start touring the record, and this was, you know, after we'd been inside for a year and I was making, you know, videos, and I was like, you know, had this very routine kind of schedule, which I'd never had at all ever in my life. And then going out to tour this record, it was interesting because it meant that I had to sort of redig up and talk about, you know, my trauma and stuff, and like doing that post-COVID, and then also at the same time having all of this like label debut buzz, plus with like Black Myself being the lead single, and this was right around George Floyd happening. Like, so there was just like a gazillion different million things happening in my brain at once at any given time, and it was just like kind of hanging on for dear life. So there's actually going to be a couple of songs that I play from that record because I feel like, and I won't say what it is. I don't know if I can. That's just. Can I spoil it? I don't know.
I mean, I'd love it.
I don't know. I
mean,
don't
this
know
isn't going on before your performance,
okay.
so go for it.
All right, cool. So I'm gonna put on. Yeah, I don't know. I'm like, oh, I don't want to spoil it.
No.
So
I want to know.
Wild Turkey and Black Myself are going to be on there, or in the show tonight because, well, those were the two like most played, most talked about songs from that record, and they also they affected, and I'm including them in this COVID era thing because those two songs coming out during COVID era had a very strong like impact on me because it because it caused me to have to go back into thinking about like generational trauma, historic trauma, and like that being something I had to talk about a lot. And it was like I didn't realize that it was even really taking a toll on me in that way until about, I think, 3 months in, someone asked me on a podcast, how does it feel to have to talk about your trauma over and over and over again? And I'm like, oh,
now that you mention,
yeah, actually, it actually kind of sucks, actually. And it just was like that, and I didn't really fully, because part of me was like, yeah, there's a lot of things going on, but like I feel like unwell and like I'm hanging on and like, you know, trying to figure out like, because there was a lot of things happening, but I felt like there was something deeper going on that I wasn't quite getting to the root to. And when that person asked that question, I'm like, oh, so that's, you know.
That's what's going on.
Yeah. So that's why I'm including those tonight because like, you know, that it's just interesting that those two songs which really writing songs like that for me is like a release of like this tension and like kind of negative thoughts and feelings. And then those very things also like wearing me down mentally because I'm also talking about them a lot. It goes back to that self-reference thing where you're just constantly talking about yourself and your things. And it's just like, I don't know. It's a fine line to walk. But yeah, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so Still and Bright that's the music that you made during the lockdown. Is
Yeah,
that right?
yeah, and most of the songs, I think there's just those two. The rest of the songs are all from that record.
And that didn't come out till 2024, right?
Right. Yeah, that came out in 2024.
Yeah. So what was it
So-
like when everything shut down and you were with yourself at your house or whatever was happening?
I mean, there was like a complete sense of loss of identity for a little bit, because I had poured a lot of my life into being a touring musician. So when I started seeing an entire year's worth of shows being canceled, I was like, what exactly, what am I going to need to like go to a technical college and learn a trade? Like what exactly is happening here? But over the course of like, I guess a couple of months, I started getting like the virtual gigs where you like either pre-record or do something live, and like getting paid to do that. So that stuff started rolling in. And then like, and then also I did like a Bank of America commercial, like I think a year prior.
Really? Okay.
And they had like written down the wrong address. So I ended up getting a bunch of like back pay residuals from that commercial. And so that was also a very fortunate thing to happen, because I wasn't really getting that money, I guess. And I had so many things going on that I had a hard time like keeping up with everything. But like, then it was like, oh yeah, you have all this, these residuals from this commercial, and it's like, oh my God. So that was like another big thing. So that happened, and more of these gigs were coming in. And then I was like, well, I'm not on the road now. So this money that I would normally be spending on travel, I can just like invest in better equipment so my videos and the sound and lighting can look better. So then I got like a DSLR camera, like an entry level camera, and then slowly started, getting lights. And then I ended up getting a really nice kind of payroll check from a job, from like a gig I was going to do that ended up getting canceled. So I'm trying to think how. Oh yeah, well actually, yeah. So our native daughter was supposed to go on tour, and that all got canceled. And then she ended up. There was like a thing where small businesses could do like could apply for money to like give to people. So she ended up like sending us all like a check to be like, hey, sorry guys, like, but here's some money. So that was also amazing, because then I was able to get a MacBook and then start recording. So I was able to like find ways to just like, okay, so now this is what I do for now. And I was starting to really like kind of get on a roll with it. And then in 2021, they're like, okay, now we're playing shows again. And I'm like,
But I just bought this equipment.
I know, I just got all this stuff.
Yeah.
And so then like, so then there was like this 2-month period where I still had to make videos, and I was also touring, and I also was starting like the campaign for the album. And it was just like it was kind of crazy. I know I keep harping on how crazy it was and how it was, but like, and there was lots of other obviously cool, like really fortunate, great things that were happening. So like, it wasn't all bad. But I just think like, I kind of feel like I guess between being at home that much and then being thrust directly into the highest volume touring that I've ever done in my life, it was just really, really weird timing. And I'm really happy that I survived it, and I had, really awesome people around me that were able to be like really supportive. So really grateful for that. But I think with trying to get back to Still and Bright.
Yeah. Well, so tell me about the content of of that album and the themes you were exploring and things like that. So now you've got the best equipment and you're by yourself and you're at home.
Yes, yeah. Sorry, all this stuff that kind of just is just floating around in my head.
This is all great.
Yeah, so being at home more also allowed for me to get back in touch with things that I stopped doing, whether it be like a hobby or an interest, because my whole life became really, for a huge chunk of my 20s, it was go to school, go to work, play shows. Mm-hmm. And to be in a position where I have a lot more time on my hands than I've ever had, I was like, well, maybe I need to figure out who I am again, because now that I'm not a touring musician, it's like, what else is there? So then I kind of went, down these kind of various rabbit holes to try to figure out stuff like and eventually I got back into
video
I got
games,
back into gaming.
I read that.
Me and Jessica, my partner, we went to we were trying to like get a Switch to play Animal Crossing, because that was the thing. And I was like, that's like, well, we can pretend like we're doing things. We can just do this life simulator while we're stuck inside. So we ended up getting Switch lights. So it kind of started from there. I also like tried my hand back in at like getting into cooking, but I realize now that I'm more into cooking for sustenance and not necessarily as a hobby. For some reason, it stresses me out, so it's not relaxing.
That's something to know about yourself, right?
Yeah. And so, but Jessica loves to cook, so I get to eat some of her food. But but another big thing was, I've always been into like sci-fi and horror and stuff like that. So I kind of started also digging back into consuming content from those worlds. So. One thing I watched was The Haunting of Bly Manor, which was which inspired the song Silk and Petals.
Okay.
And then I also got into this podcast show called Old Gods of Appalachia, and it's like a Lovecraftian style cosmic horror story set in Southern Appalachia, which sometimes in the cosmic horror world you don't necessarily hear a lot of stories coming from Southern Appalachia, so that's a really cool one. The voice acting is really great on it too. Mm-hmm. So, and that podcast inspired Die Slowly Without Complaint, and it also inspired. Oh my God, what was the other one? I should have put my set list in front of me. I can't remember anything now. God's Under the Mountain is the other one that inspired that, and I co-wrote God's Under the Mountain with Sean McConnell, who's a great songwriter, and then Die Slowly Without Complaint, I co-wrote with Avi Kaplan and Jeremy Latito. So, trying to think. Also in Play God and Destroy the World, in the chorus, there's a line where I sang, "In the darkness find the green." And I picked that instead of "In the darkness find the light," because in that one I'm making a reference to Old Gods of Appalachia, because there's this place called the Green, and this there's this couple that live in this place called the Green. They're both witches, and they both help people that have, I guess, been tainted by the dark underbelly of Appalachia, because there's all these different like scary demon-like people or entities that come from underneath the mountain. So the Green is the space where people can come and be safe. So when I talk about in the darkness find the green, it's just about finding a place of peace and safety. So
I love that.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's wonderful.
Yeah. Sorry, what was, did
No,
I?
you got it. You got it.
Sorry,
In fact,
I'm like, my brain's all over. I think I'm just like in this space.
It's overstimulating.
I'm overstimulated and I keep going off topic.
No,
so
it's good.
Anyway.
This is great. No, and Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So I guess we do have to conclude, sadly. So what else haven't we covered that you wish we would have? Is there anything else?
Oh,
Since we're recording this for the Library of Congress?
yeah.
Nope.
No, I've said so much, I think.
Well, I really
said a lot.
appreciate your time. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot.
It's been a pleasure, yeah.
Thank you. It's been awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you for listening to my interview with singer-songwriter Amythyst Kiah. To see Kiah's concert online, please visit loc.gov and search for Amythyst Kiah. I'm Nicole Saylor, Director of the American Folklife Center. We'll see you next time. Thanks.